this in, and what are some of the implications? Like in thinking back at some of these things. So March, I hear that we're going to be a problem with this trust and being able to bring people along. One of the things that I think about with November is this notion of scare tactics, because there's going to have to be a cut list, and people aren't going to like it. So just it's an implication. Like no matter what we do between now and November, and there's 20 times the number of people that come and we're all like, oh yeah, we're all in. It's still not gonna, it's not gonna change the fact that it's gonna come down to yes or no, here's what happens if it doesn't. So these things are gonna bump up. They're just implications.
Well,
it's not a, it's
use us to help you with that, you know.
Right. I'm just saying that that's what, I just want you to think through those for the next time. Because November, because the 3rd, we're also going to be talking about the implications of property and not property, because we have to act on that contract by March 1st. So the Growable property is the topic for the 3rd too, and we can come back with some scenarios. So I just don't want to give the impression that other than, and we're prepared to sort of, I don't know what happened to Kevin, I'm just, he was over there a minute ago. No, he was there, he's left. We can group some things in some scenarios, and we're prepared to do that. So we can have that ready.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Well, of course.
I think like as we think about those things, this transparency and this trust is for sure issues. But I think it's also fair to say, so how do we repair if we go this path? What are some things we can do? And if we go this path, what are some things we can do? I just want us as a committee to like back to that, like what our goals are. I don't want us to be locked into something and we're only thinking about this one way, myself included. I'm saying this to myself as well, right? So just something for us to be thinking about.
If I thought that there was a perfect answer, I would have led with it. Here's my recommendation. Like, I mean, this is a tough one. And so it's simply a matter of understanding, because here's something that's going to happen. We choose to go in November, no problem. We start going down that path and we start going with a cut list. Somebody's going to lose their mind. Why didn't you put this on in March? We would have had the opportunity. We totally would have supported that.
Why would it be a different cut list based on March or November?
Because if we fail in March, we would have November to go back. If we fail in November, we lose a year.
No matter what.
Moving forward, at least for me, if we had a bulletized list of everything that was on the levy with maybe a price tag on it, we could sort it and bucketize it into, there's no way. I had a hysterectomy on Monday, so I'm on medicine. I probably shouldn't be sitting up this long. I'm hungry and everything, but for me, just throw magnets, strips of just boom, 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 and then just the trauma center. You come in, this person needs stitches and an ice pack, boom. This person needs heart surgery, boom. And then we can get that together on March and say, look, this is our must-have. Yeah.
And we always talk
we
about
need
the
this
base.
happening.
I think that's the biggest part, because we're increasing from the base. That's what we've been trying to get from Mr. Hawley all along, is in the last few years, spending has increased considerably. Why? And then you want to add on top of that, well, why can't we get back to the spending that was? And I know you've been charged to make Loveland, the best, blah, blah, blah. But when we met with some board members, which was a wonderful meeting, we asked them about some very specific increase in expenditures, and they had no idea. They go, we never even saw that. So you're charged with making the district better, which to you may be spend a lot of money, but there's nobody watching what you're spending, from what I can see. Because we've asked those questions and nobody had answers. Why did this go up so much? And they go, we didn't realize that. And there was an expense for board members and they didn't even know what it was. So I feel
I'd like some clarification about whether your superintendent's out of control.
Nobody watching over the spending in the district, and then we're asking to give even more.
But don't you feel like some of that spending is addressed on this performance sheet here, this page number 5, talking
No,
about
some of it,
increases in
sure,
performance?
yeah.
Because I mean, I think there was a complaint at a certain point about district report cards and performance in the school, and so to fix that, some investments have to be made.
Not necessarily. The district report cards were hit hard because of opting out. Opting out did not need any more expenditures. Once they opted back in, those report cards should have gone up.
But I'm
so
saying
yes, some
if-
expenses should have
yes,
been
if all of these things
but
listed
not
here
this much.
feed into improving things in the school. So I mean, I think that does address some increases in
I'm not saying
spending.
they should be spending flat, I'm just saying it shouldn't have increased 13% in the last 2 years.
Well, but-
The other,
if it did, it needs to
the
be
other thing
okay.
that happened is we spent a certain period of time with no increases. And so, for example, in the areas of textbooks, there were no increases, and so then there's 1,000% increase because then we were able to get back into. So there is.
Maybe there should have only been a 500%.
Perhaps, but all I'm saying is when you spend nothing and then you begin to get back into what you're able to do, then you see some of those kinds of increases. I'm not saying that explains
no, you're
everything,
right.
but if I could just say, I don't usually disagree with Amy, but I think there are some people who haven't had a chance perhaps to say a question that they had. So with the understanding that the board will not meet between now and December 3rd, it would seem to me if there are burning questions or important questions that people think didn't get addressed in the committee this evening, those questions could be submitted, perhaps in an email, and might help inform the scenarios that come back. Not with the understanding that those questions would all receive a written answer, because the board won't meet between now and then to come up with a board answer, but there may be a simple answer that could come from the treasurer, could come from the superintendent, or there may not be an answer, but it could be at the next meeting, then it could say, well, this question doesn't have an answer, this one will be addressed in this scenario, that kind of
Well,
thing.
and the only thing I wanted to add is there's really only literally one work day.
Right,
also
no, I
for
understand
us.
that.
So, just because-
But we could still record those questions, so as not to have
Oh,
people feel
sure.
like, no, don't
I
ask
still wanna
any
give
more
the impression
questions,
that we were
just
gonna be able to
move forward.
work on those and move
Yes,
those forward.
yeah.
I wanted to throw out there too that I don't think Amy's spending is out of control, and I was one of the two who met with Juliet, and I think it's kind of unreasonable to expect us to know every single number on every single line without going back and looking at it. So yes, there were times where I said I'm not sure, but I have to look into that, and I think that's quite reasonable as a board.
I would just like to add, as a parent that has two graduates and two still in the district, that I have seen firsthand the change, especially in the outcome called out in the 7 to 12 curriculum. I have four young men in my family that all, one is creative, one is very technical. They all have very different talents, and they have been given different opportunities. I've watched in particular my son that's a freshman in college, who is more on the technical track, be given a ton of additional classroom opportunities through there. So when I look at the outcomes, and then I look at the big expense categories in terms of, I know there was a decision by prior superintendent to try and go more all online instead of textbooks. So I do think there's the opportunity. I understand why there's some textbooks, additional increased spending. I do think there's the opportunity to maybe flatten that out some. I think, but I am happy with the outcomes. I do think the special ed is one of those uncontrollable, like healthcare, that I would never want to turn away a special ed student. But those are two kind of uncontrollable expense categories that I think any business has, those uncontrollables, whether, and in this it seems to be special ed and healthcare, and then there's obviously the whole funding. I do think we really do need to go back and look first, as everybody seems to be saying, at the non-personnel expenses and say what can be removed. There are times when it makes sense to use a consultant versus hire a full-time employee that's on your books forever. If you're trying something new out, I do think sometimes it makes sense to try the consultant route before you hire the employee. But I would really like that burn down of non-staff, where are there opportunities that we could look to say, hey, what can we remove as we go into the next school year and then move forward? That would be kind of my look first, and then we have to make, and I think the creative ideas that Brandy mentioned, those are the same things you make in business to say, hey, what if a company needs to do a reduction in force, the retirement strategy is one that you do in for-profit business. I think it makes sense. I don't know what the implications are for the school and what needs to be weighed out in that opportunity, but it's certainly exactly what you do in for-profit business. So I think that's a great, suggestion that could help reduce expenses over time.
Yeah, I just want to build on that and say that, unless I read public sentiment wrong, my impression was that people were asking, why not more teachers, right? Why aren't there more educators being added with this massive ask? So I say that, in support of, I'm not a teacher, but in support of the teachers to know that you are valued. And for us as a group to remember that if we're going to get the community behind this, we have to be mindful of what you just said, right? Like, where are the cuts going to come?
The message, I've been on board for 8 years, the message for the last 4 to 6 years has been pretty clear. The people who came in front of the board said, you have to do better. You have to do better at this, you have to do better. Our report card stinks, and I think they put it even more strongly in front of us. And then things happen out in the world. What are you doing about safety? What are you doing about programming? Why don't we have these programs? These schools have these programs. So these are the people who came and spoke to us. And then in fairness to Amy, the response from the board, was fix it, okay? Now, I completely hear what you guys say, okay? We need to look at things. We need to look at how we fixed it. Is there a way to fix it, and could we have done that better? And that's what we have to do as a community, right? But for you guys, and my challenge for you and everybody in the community is what do you want Loveland to be, okay? Is that message still the same, okay? I mean, we said we want all this stuff, right? I want this, but now I found out what it cost. Okay, maybe it costs that much, maybe it costs a little bit less. As a community, do we still want to spend that money to be what we said we wanted to be, or is it something a little less? And we have to make those decisions, And as a board, we need to hear that from you, okay? This is not our school district, right? This is the community school district. We have to be told what you want this community, what this district needs, what you want this district to be.
Well, I think that gets back to, we need this scenario. I get what you're saying,
yeah.
But when you turn it into practical, what does that mean? If we're not going to do this, give us.
So, so if I'm hearing what I'm hearing, to me, it's a function of time. It's not going to happen this week, right?
I think there's any chance.
I'm hearing people out there, what I'm hearing. So, but if we do take that longer time frame, we need to make sure we're clear on what we want when we start to figure out how to get there, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to hear, we need to see scenarios. I'm getting that out of everyone. We need to know what the trade-offs are going to be. I won't call them cuts. And a point I heard earlier too is, this can't be vague. No one wants anything vague. This has to be clearly defined. And I think it might have been you, John, who said, how are you going to sell this? It's like, no, we need to get to a point where we sell this. Because if we can't sell the people in here, then that's it. We can't sell the community. So we have to come to agreement on what this is going to be. To me, this has been, especially when it's gotten in, people have said what they really feel. This has been great. I do admit I was one of the people, I don't know every one of Kevin's rows in his spreadsheets after 2 years. So honestly, I don't. I will try to get better at that. But this is great. And if we can't define it so it's not vague, so it doesn't seem arbitrary, so we hit all the points that people can get behind, and we can't rush it. So it's...
So I have a quick question. It feels like we're wrapping up. I know Ben suggested next time we have a beer during the meeting.
Not on school property.
Can't be on site.
I think the objectives as they are laid out in bullet point form are practically in order, right? The most important thing we have to decide, and I'd ask the board, and I won't ask you all to agree, is can we do March? And so hopefully, I'm all for, let's do a hand count, right? If you want to, I think that's probably the best. Now, there's probably folks who would prefer not to vote in public, and I get that. So hopefully the dialogue led you closer to that answer, because we can't even talk about the feasibility of the millage and everything else until we decide. And I would offer, and I think you're right, Dr. Krause, and I love the way that we took some of the themes and laid them out as potential potholes as we move forward. You know, scare tactics to me, and I know that was thrown around, and I know that that's very, you know, it gets back, John Mackey, you've been very practical here, right? We got a hole in the budget, we got to fill it up. I don't mean to be flippant about jobs. I came here because I want to pass a levy.
Yeah.
And I do not want to live in a community that had two that failed in a row.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody feels strongly about that. So then to me it feels, and it's a gut check. I would rather do it right and wait and potentially, you know, as I said earlier, you're kicking the can down the road. I would rather do it right than wait, because the scare tactics in November don't mean anything if we don't pass it in March. So
It gets worse.
yeah, and it is, you know, it's a terrible thing. Nobody wants to go through that. And I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody here, besides the fact that we need to add beer to this March 3rd. I'm not going to be here. I will have a beer in your honor March 3rd, or excuse me, December 3rd. But
You can have one on March 3rd too.
but I think that, you know, we just have to assess the practical nature. Can we turn this thing fast enough? And I will say again, I mean, I never had a lack of trust. I know that there are a lot of people in this room that worked hard and felt like they had the right answer this last time. And I'm not in any way dismissing that work, but the community spoke. So we got to go back and grind the axe again, and it just feels like it's going to be way too quick. But I'm here to pass this thing.
Me too. In fact, I voted against the last levy. I very, very, very much want to vote yes on the next one. I don't want to be a part of a community that doesn't pass levies. I want us to support our schools. Let's find a way. Yeah, I want to pass the levy.
What if we just took off the track and did the numbers again?
Start talking about the master.
Just saying. That's what I hear at Kroger.
Right on your post.
Right. What? Just take the scoreboard away. Then what do I pick?
There was no scoreboard.
Exactly. Bulletize and bulletize.
So we're just Christmas.
So one thing I just wanted to say though as well is just a practical thing is if the consensus ultimately is moving on from March and going November, just realize that like it doesn't mean that we still have 8 months to figure that out. And I'm not trying to dissuade one way or the other. I'm just saying like we're probably talking March. I mean, the reality of this is if we are considering and really looking at potential cuts, these are people's lives. We want to give people as much heads up as possible. And I'm not saying cuts all means people. I'm just trying to bring that back to that piece of it is if some of the potential cuts in spending are actually jobs, we want to make sure that we give them enough time to find jobs or to help them find jobs and positions. So the reality still is there's still a lot of work to do even if that's the case. And we're still looking at March. I would say end of March would probably be the right time to really come to some sort of an idea of what the next levy looks like if we're moving on from March and going to November.
What's the actual filing deadline?
So the filing deadline for that is not until July.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, we also want to get out and communicate as early as possible what we have here.
Well, and as Mr. Becker said, there's a lot of other work that needs to be done as well. It's not just, okay, we decide not to do March, maybe we're going to do November, so we just wait till there's a filing deadline and we do that work. There's a lot of other work that we talked about that would help us do better in November if we don't do March.
Do we know what this levy cost to put it together and run it? Like, what's it going to cost your guys' resources to put something together and run it through March and then fail? Like, that's another, the campaign. Like, your guys' time.
We don't run it.
Well, your time, you put a lot of time into it.
For us, it's our full-time job. Yeah.
But I mean,
Yes, campaign funds.
Not being flipped. I mean, that for us, that's what
but what's it taking it, what's it taking you from, that's what I'm
running a
asking.
school district.
Thank you.
Opportunity cost.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Thanks.
Priceless.
I mean, I get it, nothing was learned, I mean, it came about in July, exactly what the numbers were. It took 3 months for it to come back as a no. Again, we'd only have 3 months to try to sell it in March. I do think we're setting ourselves up for failure. And obviously to, answer what needs to be answered to make sure the community understands what they're signing up for when they pull that check.
You know, one last comment is, I said at the last meeting, is, you know, obviously we're sitting here talking about a levy or levies. You know, this whole process is not just about a levy. You know, going forward, meetings together, learning sessions, just forget stuff, okay? Where the community is pulled in and gets involved. But I'll say it one more time, we can put all that stuff together, but people have to show up, people have to voice their opinions and all that. So this, again, we're sweating out a levy right now in numbers and things, but going forward as a district, we will strive to do better to make sure we're pulling people into things, better educational, okay? And hopefully by doing those things, we're going to continue to build that trust. So if somewhere down the road we get into a similar situation, we already have that trust built up with each other, okay? And we don't have to go through the same process ever again, okay? All right. Is everybody good?
Yeah. We're very
Okay.
appreciative of everyone's time.
Thank
Really,
you.
there's a lot of time, and your dedication to this is very appreciated.
Tom?
I'm not part of your immediate group, but looking around the table, I see a lot of parents, and there's some of us that are retired. We no longer have kids in the school, so keep in mind a lot of your no's that you received in this past levy were from people that don't have kids here in the school. We still support the schools, but I think because of the kind of loss that we're seeing throughout all school districts and such now, that we have to look forward to the future where we have some kind of a change in how funds for schools are raised. This is a tremendous effort I'm seeing for just one operating levy, and I'm pretty sure the board and the whole district is thinking in terms of there's still 2 more coming up behind it somewhere. How are we going to go through this again every time, every levy, every operating levy, every 3, 4, 5 years? I mean, this is a tremendous effort. We need to come up with a different way to fund schools.
Well, maybe out of this group, we can find a group of people who will work with our legislators and try to make a change. But it's something people have been wanting to do for like 25 years. Yes.
Which
could rule a constitutional
I don't know. I mean, are there only 2 ways to fund schools through income tax and levies? Is that it? There's another way? What about through tuition?
No.
No, public school.
Okay. All right, I need a motion to adjourn, please. Washburn, Dr. Lorenz. Dr. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Pettit? Mr. Fortune? Aye. Ms. Washburn?
Aye.
Mr. Jarvis, aye. Adjourn 9:22.
typical gas.
Yeah, we are.